This video was brought to you by Incogni. At first glance, Germany seems to be one of the most pro-Israel countries in Europe. Not only is the current German government one of Israel's staunchest defenders, but German opposition parties on both the left and right have also expressed near unequivocal support for Israel. Interestingly though, while there's an important historical background to the German state's position, this doesn't match up to German public opinion, which is increasingly sympathetic towards Palestine. So in this video, we'll explain the history of German-Israeli relations, Germany's current position on Israel, and look at whether it's politically sustainable. So let's start with some history. After World War II, the new Federal Republic of Germany was led by the Christian Democratic Union's Konrad Adenauer. Confronting the horrors of the Holocaust was a seemingly insurmountable task for the new German state, and the concept of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, or coming to terms with the past, dominated the second half of the century. In the early 1950s, reconciliation efforts between Germany and Israel began when Adenauer agreed a reparations deal with the newly founded Jewish state, led by David Ben-Gurion. At this point, Israel had drained its finances fighting the 1948 Palestine War, which permanently displaced around 750,000 Palestinians from the territory that would then become Israel. The war effectively bankrupted Israel, and in its first 3 years between 1948 and 1951, the country saw an influx of nearly 700,000 Holocaust survivors and Jews from neighbouring Arab states. This created housing and unemployment crises, forcing Ben-Gurion to take austerity measures and ration food, clothing and furniture. To get the economy going, Ben-Gurion reluctantly began negotiations with Adenauer over reparations for victims of the Holocaust, and in 1952 the two leaders signed the Luxembourg Agreement. Germany pays around €1.44 billion annually into pension and care costs for victims of Nazi persecution, with reparation payments since the Holocaust totalling some €82 billion. However, there's also an important historical difference between the positions of Adenauer's Conservative Party, the CDU, and the more left-wing SPD party of Germany's current Chancellor Olaf Scholz. For the first 2 decades of the post-war period, Germany, governed by the CDU, sought close ties with Israel and established diplomatic relations in 1965. But when the SPD took over in 1969, Germany's approach to the Middle East shifted slightly. The SPD has traditionally stood up for both Israel's right to exist and the Palestinians' right to self-determination. In the 1970s, the SPD supported the role of the Palestine Liberation Organization in peace negotiations, despite the fact that PLO members had carried out violent attacks on foreign soil, including the murder of Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics. In 1979, the former SPD Chancellor Willy Brandt even met with PLO leader Yasser Arafat, which led to widespread international recognition for the PLO. Since then, the SPD has advocated for a peaceful solution to the conflict in the Middle East, and today its foreign policy approach revolves around peace promotion. Successive German governments have criticised the expansion of Israeli settlements, and former SPD leader Sigmar Gabriel once described the situation in the occupied West Bank as an apartheid. Germany has also long been one of the largest donors to UN aid efforts in Palestine. But despite the SPD's long-standing aversion to hard power, the German government has taken a turn recently, and Germany exported €300 million of weapons and military equipment to Israel in 2023, which was 10 times more than in 2022. Germany's new rearmament doctrine even makes explicit reference to Israel, stating that Israel's security is in the German national interest. In fact, while Germany's support for Israel hasn't been absolute, with the German Foreign Ministry recently describing Israel's plans to repopulate Gaza as totally unacceptable, the current German government has emerged as one of Israel's staunchest supporters since October the 7th. Last year, Scholz described accusations that Israel was violating international law as, quote, absurd, despite the fact that tens of thousands of civilians had been killed. Germany's president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, also drew criticism for suggesting that Germans of Arab and Muslim descent should actively distance themselves from Hamas. Germany has also drawn attention for its new anti-Semitism commissioners, who can cut state funding to non-governmental organizations if they deem them at risk of anti-Semitism. While this is obviously a good idea in principle, speakers including Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn have had public appearances in Germany cancelled on these grounds. Germany's regional governments and the opposition have taken similar positions. Saxony-Anhalt announced in December that to become a naturalized German citizen, applicants would have to sign a written declaration of Israel's right to exist. And Berlin's culture department recently U-turned on a clause in its arts funding criteria, which effectively prohibited criticism of the Israeli state. The Christian Democratic Union, the main opposition party, has also taken a strong pro-Israel line, with its deputy chair describing the phrase Free Palestine as the battle cry of an international terror gang. Even the far-left Die Linke and the far-right Alternative für Deutschland have in the past agreed to near unequivocal support for Israel. So what explains this pro-Israel sentiment that apparently cuts across Germany's political divide? Well, there's obviously the collective memory of the Holocaust, which the German government believes gives Germany a historic obligation to fight anti-Semitism and protect Israel's statehood. Statistics suggest these anxieties are well-founded, as according to a government report, there was a 320% increase in anti-Semitic incidents between the 7th of October and November last year. For Scholz specifically, though, one reason he's perhaps more pro-Israel than his SPD predecessors might be that he's pitched himself as the Merkel continuity candidate, and Merkel was one of Israel's most vocal supporters. During her long tenure in office, Merkel repeatedly invoked Germany's Staatsräson policy, which said that Israel's security was a part of Germany's own reason of state. The term was also parroted by Scholz in the days after October the 7th. For the German right, on the other hand, their stance on Israel and anti-Semitism interacts with their wariness about immigration, especially from Muslim-majority countries. The CDU's leader, Friedrich Merz, made this explicit last year when he said that Germany couldn't accommodate more refugees from Gaza, claiming, "We have enough anti-Semitic young men in the country." Max Mordhorst, an MP from the ruling FDP party, also said, "The issue of migration and anti-Semitism will have to be high on our political priority list for decades." And he also seemed to advocate for different political rights for non-Germans. Interestingly though, this pro-Israel position doesn't actually reflect German public opinion. While Germans are generally more pro-Israel than other Europeans, pro-Israel sentiment has waned in the past few months. Additionally, only a third of Germans think Germany has any kind of special historical responsibility for Israel, and an equal percentage, 41%, of Germans see Israel as friendly and aggressive. Finally, it's worth mentioning that Germany has Europe's largest Palestinian population, estimated to be around 100,000 people, and Muslim population, estimated at 5.5 million. This might partly explain why Germany's Israel stance has softened recently, with Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock calling for Israel to do more to let humanitarian assistance into Gaza. It will also be interesting to see whether Germany's unique relationship with Israel could allow it to influence Israeli policy going forward. While you've been learning about German-Israeli relations in this video, you might not realize that shady forces are working in the background to collect personal data from various sites and bundle it together, ready to sell it to a third party. These data brokers can sell this bundle of personal information to anyone, from a company to an online criminal. Now, you might assume that you're safe online. Perhaps you change your password regularly, or perhaps you're a hawk and always uncheck the box that signs you up for annoying newsletters. Unfortunately, this doesn't completely save you, and companies that hold your data can still fall victim to a data breach, meaning that these data brokers can still compile information about you to sell on to others. This is where our sponsor, Incogni, comes in. They reach out to these data brokers on your behalf, request that your data is removed, and deal with any problems that might arrive. In fact, they're tenacious and will put in multiple data removal requests even after your data has been removed to make sure that it doesn't go back on the market. So create an account with our link in the description. Grant Incogni the ability to work on your behalf and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, by using our link, you'll get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Thanks for checking it out, and thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video.